and welcome back to one of our little chats. I'm actually really excited about today because today we are going live with Anna Sachs to discuss about Earth Matter. So the notorious, the famous, the trash walker, she's going to be able to join us, and so I'm so excited. So let's get her on here so then we can introduce ourselves.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, how are you? So good to see you.
Good to see you. Should we just get started?
Let's just dive right into it. Let's do it.
Great. So I'm Anna, and I'm a friend of Earth Matter. I've known about Earth Matter for years, and then became more involved with them through working through Save Our Compost Coalition.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Esmeralda Herrera. I was an apprentice of Earth Matter this year, 2021, and just fell in love with the place. And so here I am doing these lives.
Awesome. And so I think I'll start interviewing you a little bit, if that's okay.
Of
Um,
course.
so, how did you first hear of Earth Matter, and what brought you there?
Yeah, so I think similarly, so I was a farm school student, and the second year of farm school, you have to do your apprenticeship. And I just really wanted a place where I was like gonna get nitty gritty in the farming experience, especially someone as novice as myself. It was really my first time. So I came across Earth Matter because they were one of the recommended apprenticeship sites. I checked them out online. I had a chat with Marissa, and I really just fell in love with the place. And I think I learned so much because even though I was going in to learn about maybe gardening and farming, which are amazing, I think I ended up with a deep love for composting.
That's awesome. And for people who don't know what Earth Matter is, where is it and what does it do?
Yeah, so Earth Matter is a nonprofit that runs a both a lavender field, a compost learning center, and the Soil Start Farm, and it's located on Governor's Island, which I didn't even get to go until I started going to Earth Matter. Now it's a really large piece of place. You get to really grow some veggies, so they compost about 1,200,000 pounds of compost this year alone. They get about 16,000 visitors and volunteers that are coming through, talking about all ages, wanting to learn about compost, feed the chickens, maybe pet the goats. And then they get about 40 apprenticeships, folks who are leading either in their community gardens and want to learn more to be able to bring it back to their own home.
I love that. And also, I don't think people, yeah, I think it's a hidden gem in some ways of New York City because like I've gone to Governor's Island before. They have like this jazz festival every year or like the
Mm-hmm.
20s party sort of thing. But they have a lot more stuff there too. They have Earth Matter and they have the Billion Oyster Project, right?
Yes.
Which restores New York City's reefs using oysters, which filter the water. And so, after you completed your apprenticeship, what did you take with you, and how are you taking it going forward in this next stage of your life?
Yeah, girl, I think that when I left Earth Matter, I felt so like, first of all, I didn't even like garbage before, right? Like the smell of compost was really disgusting to me. But I think I had this, just being real, afterwards, I felt this fire inside of me. I was like, this is what we need to do. Like, if we're really going to, you know, save the planet, we're really going to like just decrease our waste. If we're really going to be logical and strategic about what we could immediately do right now, this is what we could immediately do right now. So I walked away like, look, composting in my house. I talk to anybody who I want to. I'm gonna tell you a little about compost, and I don't care because I'm like, did you know? Did you know? So I started working at the botanical garden soon after, just a little part-time gig, and I noticed that a lot of the teens there, they may know a little bit about it, but they don't know the details of how it runs. So I find myself like, oh, here's an opportunity to educate. But for bolder stuff, I've been thinking, I'm like, maybe I should get my whole building into it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of the benefits of the local community composting sites. It's like it's a hands-on, small-scale composting opportunity that provides a lot of education, and then people take that education and bring it back to their communities. And I think for me also, compost was like my introduction to waste issues because it showed me this alternative and this very ancient natural cycle of recycling the nutrients contained in food scraps back into the earth. And so I think that that's one of the benefits of having these sites physically in New York City. It's very different to theoretically know about composting versus to see it in action. And also it provides these green jobs that really can transform people, which I love, and build community too.
Yeah.
And so when you are a native New Yorker,
Hmm.
just like me, but um, what made you start to think about the environment in general? Was there a
Yeah.
specific moment?
Yeah, so, New York native like yourself, I've been born and bred here in the Bronx, and I've truly felt, I've said this to a lot of people before, like the Bronx just feels really forgotten in a lot of ways. I've lived in other states for a brief periods of time, other countries even, and I love my Bronx. I really do. I'm not trying to put anyone on the spot, but I have felt, I think, my unhealthiest here, because of, what is inside of the grocery stores? What are you selling? Like, how soon do they expire? What options do you have? Where is the farmer's market? And how close is it to you? What is your park? Is it accessible? Is it something that you even want to go to? So I think all of these things have always come to my mind, and I think especially having like maybe lived outside for a few, and I think those issues of like, okay, well, if I can't get something, what's going on? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's what really drove me to farm school to begin with, which led me to Earth Matter, because it was thinking about like, well, if it's not coming to me, like how can I go to it? So how can I gain the knowledge that I need to figure out what I need to get for myself?
Yeah. And I think also there's the irony of Hunts Point is located in the Bronx, which for people who don't know, that's where the majority of New York City's food comes in. And then at the same time, we were speaking earlier about like your experience going to the grocery store and like what would you see there in terms of like the produce and other food that's available.
Yeah, the the grocery stores that are near me, they will have just a small little section for produce, right? And sometimes if you were going to buy that produce, you would really have to use it that day or, soon after, because there would they were just going to expire very quickly. And that's kind of like a notion that I had grown up with. I don't know if other Bronxites feel this way, but I've been taught that way. Like, oh, if you really want something to last a bit longer, you go to Manhattan, you purchase your produce, then you can at least have them for a week or so. And yes, there's all these other things that you could do. You could put things in water, you could put them in the fridge, but you can see the options weren't very, it looks so different in comparison.
Yeah. I've heard from some people who, go through their trash like I do that the the fruits and vegetables that Manhattan stores throw away are higher quality than like what's available on the shelves in the Bronx. Which is yeah, it's messed up, obviously. Um, and so, what are you doing now in terms of your career? And is composting or is things related to the earth a part of it? And if not, how do you bring that into your job?
Yeah, so for my day job, I work a lot with social entrepreneurs, people who are trying to solve a social issue or an issue, right, with a business idea. And I think even though I work with really just a different types of entrepreneur, they could be tackling issues of education, they could be tackling issues of health and well-being. They will come along people who are very much involved in waste, right, in food, healthy options for people, and they'll try to come up with an idea that may be in partnership with a community garden. And I think that my knowledge that I gained with like Earth Matter, really helps me say, okay, look, this is what I know. These are the partners that you can go with, right? Here are some fiscal sponsors that I've heard about. And so that's been really helpful. And then I can like realistically business guide them and consult them. But, one of the things that I did was join the Bronx Botanical Garden. And though they do this in a very different way, like I was saying, I work with the children's garden, and to be able to come up with curriculum for the teens and the young college students that are there to be like, okay, well, let's talk about canning, another possibility for like not having to waste your food, right? Let's talk about, our composters, and how can you teach this to little kids so that their introduction is much sooner than something that I had, because I definitely didn't learn about compost until way later. And we now know so much. We could do justice. We could do a little better, right?
Yeah, I wish that that was more the curriculum in schools. I think that they do need to integrate more about food and how do you preserve food and how do you cook food and how do you responsibly dispose of food, which is through composting, and how can you do that at home, or how can you do that, on a larger scale. I think I think that's a valuable part of education, and also something you could bring with you afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and I think, you have an interesting story too, and I just would love for folks to hear it. So, like, how did you get involved in Earth Matter, and like, where did that lead you? I mean, I know you were already a powerhouse even before that, but like, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, composting was my introduction. Composting kind of guided my career. I was, for people who don't know, and I feel like I've been like saying my story too many times recently, which is like, but anyways, I started at an investment bank for several years after college. I went on a farm, and a regenerative farm, called Adama, and did this Jewish farming fellowship. And then it was there that I learned about composting. And specifically, we would have morning chores where it could be like milking the goats. That was one. Another one was like schlepping the food scraps up a hill and then dumping them into the compost yard where we had heritage chickens. The typical industrial chickens can't eat anything. Can only have a specific diet, which is mostly like corn and soy. Versus these heritage chickens can eat anything. They can forage, and it's fine for them to have different food scraps. So they would eat the food scraps, and then what was left would be converted into compost. And then that compost would fertilize the farm. So we didn't have to rely on synthetic fertilizer, which produces a lot of issues. It's basically like these nitrogen pellets that are unstable molecules, and they lead a lot of times to nitrogen runoff that goes into the water and produces toxic algae blooms. And they're very harmful to produce the actual pellets. So we would use the compost to fertilize the farm and then grow more food. And I really fell in love with that cycle because it felt so natural. It's kind of a death and a rebirth, and it's something it felt like, of course, this makes sense to preserve the nutrients and return them in the soil and to complete that cycle. And then when I returned to New York City, that was my guiding star. That was like what I wanted to do in my career. It was just when people asked me what I wanted to do when I was unemployed, I would say compost. And then that's where I learned more about the Compost Project and Earth Matter and Big Reuse and Lower East Side Ecology Center. And then I also took the Master Composting course, which is coming back to New York City this spring, I think. And I met some great people there, and some of my close friends I also met through that. So that's why with Save Our Compost, it's community composting to me and to so many other people is so important to the city. It really is the community aspect, and it really of creating community, doing something productive and helpful. And also the educational opportunities, which is why I really support Earth Matter. And Earth Matter also has chickens. I don't know if people know that. But as part of, and you have a farm that, right, you give back some of that produce.
Yeah. So two comments. So one, We donate about 1,500 pounds of produce, fresh veggies, to the Catholic worker, and so we really hope that like donations can help double that, to be able to donate more. But I've been reading the comments, and I was, some people have questions about like, well, why does the Bronx have these issues, right?
Mm,
And I really want to tackle some of these questions because there's this notion that the Bronx is poor. Well, actually, it's a very rich borough. You got the Bronx Zoo, you have the Bronx Botanical Garden, you have the Yankee Stadium. You have three major tourist sites. But guess where the money is going? It's going into these institutions and right back out, right? And that has to do with a lot of different things. I don't know. I'm not targeting these institutions, but I'm just pointing out that there is an infrastructure issue here, right? So it's not about the Bronx having high poverty, though there is, right? It's one of the highest. It was like the lowest poorest congressional district for a really long time. It's not the poorest anymore in the nation, but it's still one of the poorest. But like, what's going on? There's a misplacement here, just like you were pointing out, like the Hunts Point, right? We have the largest produce coming into New York City. We have three of the major tourist sites that people come to New York City for, and yet there is these deserts, right? These like swamps where what you find in food will be low nutrition, will not be lasting long, and will be expiring. And so I wanted to just directly say that.
thank you. Yeah, I think that's important. And then also, when we were talking before, you mentioned the state of the park. So sometimes, like in Central Park, where I go often, it's I love it. It's one of my favorite parts in New York City, and it's really well maintained. It's like there's a lot of resources that go into it. And then I wanted to, yeah, about your experience in parks in the Bronx, some of them.
Yeah, so I think for me, I've gone to a couple, but the one closest to me right now, um, people love it. I know they love it because they go to it. And the reason I know they go to it is because there's a lot of trash pile up. And so there really is not a lot of resources to maintain that. And it has a lot to do with many things, right? The etiquette of going to a park. Maybe folks who are going there are not exposed to that, right? Haven't been told that, right? There's also, well, are there enough people working in this park where we have resources to hire to kind of maintain that? Do we have enough locations to be able to host people, which is why maybe there's been like an influx of people who go there. So there's so many different things going on there, and I know that people enjoy it. And just wish we had a little bit more resources to be able to figure that out. But I mean, Central Park, you got a lot of visitors, like you got a lot of tourists coming too. So where is the infrastructure issue?
Yeah. And Saturdays, weekends, I often see like trash cans overflowing and then like makeshift trash cans next to it where people take like a bag and then just leave it there. But it gets cleaned up really quickly. I think that's one of the big differences is about the workforce and, the amount of money that allows the trash bins to be emptied more frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what was it like for you going to the farm school and going to Earth Matter as someone from the Bronx? Did you then, did you feel that, yeah, just like, what did you feel with that about, did you feel you were denied certain things and all of a sudden you saw what you were denied, the education of farming, the education of composting, the education of being outdoors? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think there is a lack of exposure, right? And again, I'm not, a child in the Bronx anymore, so there may be a lot more things. Oh, there's definitely a lot more things. Now there's schools with, community gardens on the rooftop. But I think for me and, maybe my little cohort of people in my age, there wasn't a lot of exposure to that. We had yards that were made out of cement and, you just played basketball in. And so when I went to Governor's Island, I always got used to this thing of I have to travel far to get this healthy experience, or I have to travel far to get near trees and flowers, right? That's always been like, I think, a built-in for a lot of folks here in the Bronx. And again, it depends where you're located in the Bronx. Definitely, I think a lot of like mid and South Bronx folks feel this way. And so when I finally got to, when Earth Matter, I think, I mean, farm school helped me expose to like, oh, there's a lot of people, there's especially a lot of Bronx folks who love this. They want to be doing this, they are doing it. They're they're doing amazing things. And it's just like, how do you get in touch with them? And then in Earth Matter, I think being exposed to like compost at that level, right? Not just like you composting at home, which is amazing, but to see it in this grand level where you're like seeing steam coming off of this, I don't know, it felt exhilarating. And at the beginning, it's really hard to get used to. I was like, is this for me? Like, can I really do this? But I think after a while, getting to the fresh end of like, oh, look at this lovely scent of compost that you actually turn this into this, was really amazing. So I think exposure for sure can be shocking, but it was definitely worth it.
And just to end, I think, what are some calls to action that people can take? I think the two threads that we've been talking about, and sorry, my dog's just like pawing at my door, so I'm going to open it for him. The two threads I think we've been talking about are composting and Earth Matter, and then goes some large, like with the Bronx, and the Bronx not having access to what other boroughs have access to, especially in terms of public space and fresh food. So what would you say are some calls to action for both of those?
Yeah, no, and those are really big topics.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think to start, Earth Matter, right? They really are doing the work to teach leaders, like myself, being super new, but having at least some connections in the Bronx and the enthusiasm to want to be a part of this. And so, donations really go to teaching, right? Not just adult apprenticeship, but student apprenticeships that like, for them, they're going on like the student, especially student apprenticeships, they're going on to green jobs, and like innovation in green jobs, and in green jobs meets tech. And I think like that's beautiful. And so that exposure is really important. So that call to action is, if you have, whatever you have, whether that's $1 or 10 or more, and you would love to donate to Earth Matter so that they can continue supporting, these leaders, and, obviously the million pounds of compost that they're able to produce. And again, that's available to any residential home. If you can buy Earth Matter and you want a little compost to take home for your plants, you could do that. So that's really a call to action. And if you can't, then just reshare us, tell somebody about Earth Matter, and like if they wanted to come volunteer and check it out. So that's a call to action for that. And I think in terms of the Bronx, there's a lot to do there. I think my Bronx folks, it's about going out and really looking at legislation sometimes and figuring out like, who do you need to put in office that's going to make sense. And if fine, if you don't want to do that, you go and you pound down to your leaders and say, this is what I need. You haven't given me this, like, you need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And that can be hard, but you could also talk about it, right? Talk about it with each other. Hey, I value this. I want to stay in the Bronx, and I value this. So I hope to see this, right? I think the dangers that happen especially for folks in the Bronx, is that we don't want gentrification, right? And so how do we get to a good solution without feeling like we are misplacing some of our hardworking folks? And so I think that's where we're like, okay, so that's why I'm calling out all Bronx folks and say, hey, go out and figure out and vote whoever you need to figure out what is important for you, your health, and your well-being.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's always, I know that other places in New York City have had this issue of just like beautifying the neighborhood and planting things and making it a more livable space, and then rent goes up, and then people who rent are not able to afford to stay there. So it's definitely like that is a big struggle of how do you improve neighborhoods, and while not displacing people who live there in the process. Yeah. Well, thank you for those suggestions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion also. And yeah, I want to echo that one, Earth Matter is a great organization, a great nonprofit to support, and go visit, go volunteer, donate if you have the means. And two, that New York City, from what I've experienced, actually, is a great place to get involved locally, that the council members actually listen, they record the number of calls, you can work with them to push legislation. And so that's really, to me, that's the way that you change things, is through legislation rather than through individual action or through voluntary ideas. It's through making it so that corporations, or so that whatever it is you're pushing for, so making it so that it's legally binding. So I would say get to know your council member. If you don't know your council member, call them up, give them a visit, and talk to them about the issues that you care about.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for being with us and saying all those kind words. And, just wanted to shout out to the comments. It's true, right? If there's not money coming in, how would they lift a finger? But, as somebody who works with a lot of businesses and businesses that put on events for, local people, there's discretionary funds, and I've seen it used. And so it's like, how do we get these local businesses or local leaders that are doing good things to get some of that money? So it's not like, you're right, there's not enough funding, but how do we use and mobilize what we got going on to, head toward the direction we want to head? And so thank you so much, Anna, for just being with us, sharing about Earth Matter and our mission to reduce misguided waste. And thank you. And I guess I'll see you next time.
Yeah, I hope to meet you in person.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining. Bye.
Bye.